Welcome to Two-Stroke Diagnostics. This lesson demonstrates procedure for checking the common ground for the coil and run/kill switch. All lessons are taken from the Advanced Sequential Troubleshooting worksheet provided at the service school. This lesson is in reference to Section N, Ignition Inspection, Item 2, Check Stop Switch, and Item 4, Check Common Grounds. What is the common ground? The common ground is where the coil laminations, metal strips that form the coil legs, and the cylinder/crankcase are grounded together. Without this ground, the coil will not generate spark. In this picture, our coil is mounted to our cylinder through this bolt and this bolt. Sometimes there are plastic spacers behind the coils, between the coils and the cylinder. In those cases, the bolts acts as the ground for the coil laminations to the cylinder. Also note, coils come from the factory sprayed with lacquer. That lacquer prevents them from rusting and keep them looking good for years. The lacquer acts as a insulator and add resistance for the coil laminations to the cylinder. During the next few minutes, we will cover how to check the common ground on handheld stick-mounted two-stroke unit. These units require 0.2 ohms or less resistance for the common ground. This value may vary by model or brand. Anything more than 0.2 ohms will require further action by the service technician to determine the cause and repair of the excessive resistance. During this short video, we will be using an analog multimeter. Our readings must be taken on a 0 to 1 ohm scale. If you choose to use a digital multimeter, it must be rated to test for 0.1 ohm or less. Most digital multimeters cannot test for that low resistance and will provide false readings. Here is our little analog digital multimeter. Notice we have our ohm scale set to R times 1 or 0 to 1 ohms. Zero your meter in accordance with the owner's manual. My particular unit requires nothing more than touching the two tips of the two probes together and using this ohms adjust knob to set my needle to 0. I have my meter adjusted. Now we're going to take our reading. This is the correct setup to check the coil resistance to the cylinder. Here's our ground with our alligator clip. Here's our red probe. Notice I have removed the lacquer from the coil so my probe touches the metal leg and doesn't have to try to get through the lacquer. On this unit, we got 0 ohms, which is an excellent reading. The max we're looking for is 0.2 ohms. Any reading over 0.2 ohms will require the coil to be removed and all ground points to be sanded on the cylinder and the coil laminations. The coil must be reinstalled at the proper gap for that unit and another reading must be taken. Once the coil is properly grounded, we can test a wiring harness and on-off switch to ensure they are grounding properly in the stop and run positions. Here we're going to check for the stop switch in the stop position. Here's our red probe attached to our red wire. Our ground is still going to our cylinder on the other side. Notice our reading of 0 ohms. That means the kill wire is taking the ignition and killing it. It is actually going to ground, which is an excellent reading. Next, we're going to check the run position. Same setup. Our red probe to our red wire. Our black probe is still grounded to the cylinder. Notice our meter is reading infinity. That means we are running and the engine is not killed. This concludes the common ground testing. Please view our other two-stroke diagnostics videos.